Hi, Ilona Matteson here with Beach Realty and Construction, coming to you today to talk to you about how short sales are changing in North Carolina due to a recent forms change by the North Carolina Association of Realtors. There's a short sale addendum that basically governs how the transaction will take place, and this form had some major revisions starting July 1st of this year. And so I'm going to just go over the five main revisions that are the most important to note. The first one is the definition of a short sale. Because the banks have now sort of adopted and accepted the fact that simply being underwater or upside down on your mortgage, meaning owing more on the mortgage than what the property's market value is, they are now accepting just as a hardship, just the fact that you're upside down is a hardship, and that a strategic short sale is now somewhat more of an accepted process where you may or may not have some funds or a lot of funds in order to actually close the transaction, but they're going to approve your short sale or could approve your short sale and consider your hardship to be simply that you're underwater. So they've changed that definition to be recognizing these strategic short sales. The second change that they've made is that the seller must approve, or the seller has the opportunity to approve or not approve the lien holder's decision. In the past, the way it worked is, the buyer would present the offer, seller would sign it, we would send it to the bank, and once the bank approved it, if they had some conditions or terms for the short sale that the seller really didn't agree with or want to take part in, the seller was kind of stuck in the situation unless everybody agreed to walk away. You were really technically stuck in that contract. So this addendum is allowing now that the seller has the right to terminate the contract if the seller does not agree with the terms of the lien holder's approval. So that if they feel like it's not a good deal for them or some of those terms are not conducive to their situation, they can terminate the contract, even if the bank has accepted it. The next change is that, giving the definition or the actual language that the buyer and seller have the right to terminate the contract prior to lien holder's approval. So, it's always been the case that as a buyer, you present your offer and the seller signs it, we submit it to the bank. It could take, who knows how, it could take 6 days, it could take 6 weeks to get an answer from the bank. Every short sale is different. If in that process the buyer decides they don't want to do this anymore, they find something else, something changes, they've always had the right to terminate the contract prior to notice from the seller that the lien holder has approved their offer. Once that notice has been given, the buyer may rely on their due diligence period to terminate the offer, but the short sale addendum termination ends there once the lien holder approval has been notified to the buyer. Well, now the seller also has that same right. Prior to the seller giving buyer the notice that the lien holder has approved the offer, the seller may terminate the contract. So even if the lien holder has approved the offer, seller's notified of the approval, doesn't like the terms, or something else has changed, the seller may also terminate the contract as long as he hasn't notified the buyer that the contract has been accepted by the lien holder. The fourth change that is important are the respective due diligence and closing dates. We had always written into the contract before that, due diligence period would begin after lien holder approval and last for X number of days. After lien holder approval. Same with closing date, that it would take place X number of days after lien holder approval. Not knowing when that approval was going to come, we didn't want to write a contract with dates that were too restrictive. So now the short sale addendum has provided us with blanket dates of 15 days for due diligence and 30 days for closing, or it gives you the option to write in how many days you want to have for due diligence after lien holder approval, and how many days closing will take place after lien holder approval. So you can use the standard 15-30, or you can write your own dates in. And then the last change that they made to the addendum is how we deal with multiple offers. In the past, the seller really is the contracts are set up only for the seller to accept one offer, one contract as a primary contract, and then a second contract as a backup contract. Well, in the business of short sales, it wasn't really conducive to that situation because we might have 5 or 6 offers on one property, and they all might be really great or have a few $1,000s difference between them, and only 2 of them could have been considered because we can only the forms legally accept a primary contract and a backup contract based on the forms that we had provided to us. So the short sale addendum is now giving the seller the option to accept multiple offers, turn into multiple contracts, work with multiple buyers at a time without using any of the backup contract addenda. So you could be with your offer sitting there and waiting for bank approval, and an offer can come in for $15,000 higher. The seller, needs to notify you of what's going on. You certainly have the right to terminate, but they can go ahead and accept that contract. The seller could actually terminate your contract. The seller can present that new contract to the bank, remove yours from consideration. He has to keep you notified, but he doesn't have to have your permission to do this. So it's going to be interesting to see how this change affects, how we deal with short sales. I'll be curious to see if there's any new revisions to this addendum next year once we put this into practice. So, if you've thought about buying or selling a house here in North Carolina on the Outer Banks and you're looking at a short sale, if you need some more information, certainly feel free to give me a call. Thanks.